We are talking about game-based learning today, and the point of this is just to be a very fast, game-based learning 101 for folks who want to know a little bit more. And it's meant to be meant to be a teaser for our big workshops that we have coming up. They're a couple hours long. They're with Dr. Jason Charette, who is teaching political science and using some role play simulations, inspired by tabletop role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons to really get students engaged in what they're learning about in those classes. So we're really excited to host those workshops with him and to have some really in-depth time for folks to develop simulations for their classes if they would like to use game-based learning in their courses. But first, we're going to start with a couple definitions. Game-based learning and gamification are often used interchangeably, although there are subtle differences between the two. And what I really discovered is that game-based learning uses game design elements to build these more cohesive active learning experiences. So it's really about transforming the learning experience to be more gameful. Meanwhile, gamification is like game-based learning light, where these game design elements are used in traditional learning settings and experiences to make them more game-like. And so for gamification, we're really looking at extrinsic motivators like class leaderboards or point-based grading methods, bringing a cuckoo into class or sending students on a scavenger hunt. There's definitely benefits. So there's memory benefits for gamification. There's engagement benefits. But really, when we talk about gamification, we're talking about taking those game design elements and applying them to more traditional learning experiences. Now, game-based learning, on the other hand, it's more difficult to enact in the classroom because it's supposed to really transform your learning experience that you're designing to be more gameful. So I have some examples for these like more in-depth game-based learning techniques. And that's where we're really talking about like simulations, role play, cooperative play. And this is why I'm really excited about that workshop that we're running with Jason. And over on the right, you're going to see all of the benefits that have been studied that kind of came up in my initial research. There's the extrinsic motivation, there's the memory benefits, there's the engagement, but we're also talking about intrinsic motivation, which we talk about that in teaching as that thing that we would love to get students to feel more often, but it's really hard to inspire intrinsic motivation for students. That's that sense of like motivation that comes from within. But gaming often kind of brings us into these psychological states that allow us to be motivated. We're motivated by competition, we're motivated by challenge, we're motivated by playing. And so the idea behind game-based learning is that you are inspiring this psychological state in students so that they have all of these benefits with their learning. There's also so much there to talk about with accessibility. Students are able to make deeper cognitive connections if they are able to play out simulations or experiences that they can relate back to their learning. It's all about that active, hands-on learning that really inspires students to remember, to make connections to concepts. And there's so much there in terms of community building and collaboration and communication. I am personally teaching an integrated capstone right now, where the focus is interactive games for social impact. And so I'm able to bring these games into the classroom, and I'm definitely seeing this, sense of community building and cooperation. And I'm hoping that maybe that will become a sense of social belonging in the classroom, kind of inspired by this fun, engaging kind of atmosphere that we're building by integrating games into the class. with gamification versus game-based learning, one of the things I talked about was that intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. And gamification can be a lot easier. It can be easier to bring a leaderboard or a Kahoot to class. But it is worth saying that I love this quote, that learning systems based solely on external rewards could harm students' creativity and persistence. So external rewards, grades, points, winning, leaderboards, etc. So it is really, I think, useful to think about the subtle differences between these two things and when it is appropriate to bring gamification into your classrooms versus a more cohesive game-based learning experience. Extrinsic, sorry, this is supposed to be, say, intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, allows or is brought about when students feel like they have autonomy, when they have challenge, and when they have purpose. So again, that's supposed to say intrinsic motivation, not extrinsic motivation. And then gameful experience is something that comes up a lot of in the research. And this is kind of defined as a psychological state that can be found in participants of games. And there's a lot of really awesome benefits that you get when people reach a psychological gameful experience. But to get to the gameful experience, there are things that need to happen. So this one reading that I checked out talked about how students really need a sense of that this is important and that although challenging, it is achievable as well. So I was relating this to that recipe for intrinsic motivation, the autonomy, the challenge, and the purpose. And then I really loved this part too, and believing that one's actions within these constraints to be volitional. So students need to feel like they have impact. So it's not enough to be like, let's play Kahoot today, and yep, you guys are all having gameful experiences, but that their actions have consequences within the game, within the simulation. That is really when gamefulness is achieved. Now, implementing game-based learning in your classroom is not a simple task. And so I do encourage folks who are interested in integrating game-based learning into their classrooms to do so in small ways to start with. And Jason is a big proponent of this too. He's been, developing these simulations that he's using in his classrooms for years and years and years. And so every year he adds a little something in to make it even more, all encompassing and really hands-on and stuff. But you don't need to feel like that's the only way to do game-based learning. Small steps are really important, and thinking about how you can teach concepts through games is a great way to start. And I do have a couple of resources to share in terms of looking for games that might be relevant to particular classes, but I also do encourage folks to come to that workshop because Jason has designed time for everybody to be working on what simulation they would like to bring to their classroom, and he's ready to help folks actually create something that they want to bring into their teaching. But there are 4 kind of key elements to game-based learning, and I think there's a lot of overlap between just instructional design best practices too. So I found that very exciting. There's goal setting. You need to have the objects of the game, the behaviors of the game, so the mechanics. What does play look like? What are what constitutes playing that game? And I think of this as like setting objectives in the classroom. So what is it that students, what skills are students building? What knowledge are students building in that classroom? I see a lot of awesome synergy between these two things. Then player engagement. So these are those, a continuation of the behaviors of the game, the specific game dynamics utilized to achieve the object. So that's when we're really talking about, rewards. How do students know that they're doing well in the game? Tracking mechanisms. This relates directly back to, a grading system that can uh, help students get an understanding of how can they improve. We're talking about, feedback loops. You can have things in the game like currency, levels, what are the rules of the game. So this is how players interact and engage with the particular game. And then the environment design is the third key element, and that's where we're really thinking about the place in which the game is played. So whether this be if we're role playing right in the classroom, what aspects of the environment need to be considered in order to facilitate that gameplay, or perhaps we're thinking about platform that we're playing games on. So we're really talking about video games there or board games, but the environment is very important to consider. And then the fourth key element in the literature is this idea of progressive design, which is so exciting to me as an instructional designer. Very nerdy of me, but the idea that game-based learning is an iterative process of design. So you should think about feedback and revision loops for yourself, for your students, making small adjustments, making changes to the rules, or perhaps, bringing in new constraints if you feel that students need a new challenge. And these four things together, I just love them as kind of a roadmap for starting to design game-based learning experiences, because they do feel so familiar to those of us who have joined in the instructional design process. Now, one little resource that I have found so far, and I hope to kind of build a little bit more of a resource through the collab. So I'll keep looking, and I do encourage folks to send me anything that they find too. But I found this fantastic gamesforchange.org, and then /games will bring you to their whole repertoire of games. This is an organization that collects and rewards and encourages the creation of games that are created for the purpose of social impact. And so I have found some fantastic games through this website that talk or that allow students to explore concepts, but in a game-based learning way. One of these that I brought to my interactive storytelling class was Fake It to Make It, which is a game in which you play a blogger who has been tasked to spread misinformation and fake news. And the more clicks you get, the more outrageous your articles are, the more money you get. And it is directly inspired by very real things, very real situations where bloggers were indeed paid lots of money to spread misinformation in America, especially during the 2016 political election. So this is something that I found through that resource. So this is just such a fantastic resource to look into and to see if there's anything you can toggle to show only things that can be played through web, which is really easy to bring into a classroom. So that's a great place to start. And then I've mentioned it a couple times, but I do hope that folks consider coming to one of our Level Up Your Classroom workshops with Dr. Jason Charette. We have one on February 19th from 3 to 5 p.m. and one on February 21st from 12 to 2 p.m. The first part is going to be that you are actually going to be immersed in a simulation of Jason's to kind of see what it's like and to be a participant in that. And then the second half is going to be designing your own simulation for your class. And with that, I will stop the recording. Thank you so much.